It is the final trading day of the week. You're watching Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18 in the Mumbai News Center. I am Hormuz Patakia. With me, as always, is Vamakshi Dhoria. Vamakshi, good morning. You're heading into the weekend. That's a big relief. But the bigger relief is that the Bulls have made a very, very strong comeback.
Well, absolutely a roaring comeback from the Bulls, especially in the last few minutes of the trading session. But let's see how today's trading session pans out then. Let's start off with the top headlines. Stocks closed mostly higher in the US market despite the slump in tech shares as investors pass retail sales data. Dow ends 270 points higher. S&P 500 scores 4-day winning streak on favorable economic data and corporate earnings.
Asian markets are mostly lower in early trading as investors assess trade developments. The GIFT Nifty is indicating a gap up start for our own markets.
Oil prices slip on expectation for a US-Iran nuclear deal that could result in sanctions being eased and more barrels released onto the global market. Gold prices edge up after US bond yield dips as weak US data spurs rate cut bets.
More accounting discrepancies come to the fore at IndusInd Bank. Internal audit finds 674 crore rupees incorrectly recorded as interest income and 595 crore rupees in substantiated other assets.
A big block deal is likely in Bharti Airtel today. Sources tell CNBC TV 18 that Singtel will sell nearly 5 crore shares of the company for approximately 8,500 crore rupees.
An interesting day that lies ahead, especially considering how the yesterday's trading session panned out in the weekly options expiry. We'll talk more about that as the show goes by. But first up, let's take a look at how the Asian markets are panning off. And it's a pretty cautious looking screen, if you could call it that, across the Asia Pacific. The Hang Seng is still trading 0.7% lower. Most of the Asian indices that are functioning as of now are trading in the red. The Nikkei continues to underperform, still 0.4% lower. The Kospi is the only one among the major indices, barring the Taiwanese index, of course, that is trading above the flat line. But the Shanghai Composite 2 trading 0.25% lower. So it's a cautious looking screen across the Asia Pacific despite a positive session that Wall Street had in yesterday's trading session. You pull up the GIFT Nifty and give us an idea of how we are likely to start off. 90 points higher, not bad, after the reversal that we saw from the lows in yesterday's trading session, closing at a 7-month high above the mark of 25,000. So as of now, the implied open is suggesting an uptake, Vamakshi. But how was the US market session?
Well, absolutely, Hormuz. In the US market, Wall Street ended Thursday's trading session mixed. The Dow surged more than 270 points, while the S&P 500 added 25 points at close. The tech-heavy index Nasdaq was the underperformer, shedding almost 35 points. CNBC's Bertha Coombs gets us a wrap of all the action on Wall Street.
U.S. markets were mixed across the major indexes in Thursday trading as confidence strengthened after the U.S. and China agreed to temporarily cut tariff rates and Treasury yields also fell. The Dow climbing 272 points, the S&P 500 adding 24, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq slipped 34 points. Walmart said today that it's going to have to raise prices because of tariffs. The company's chief financial officer told CNBC that tariffs are, quote, still too high, even with the pause in reciprocal tariffs for Chinese goods that was announced earlier this week. CFO John David Rainey also said the retail giant will try to absorb some of the higher tariff costs in an effort to try to keep prices down for its customers. But he said shoppers will likely see prices go up this month and more in June. Meantime, Coinbase said today that hackers bribed its overseas support staff to steal customer data to use in scam attacks. The crypto exchange operator said it received an email last week from someone who claimed that they had sensitive data and demanded $20 million ransom. Coinbase added that it has not paid the demand and is cooperating with law enforcement on the investigation looking into the incident. Meantime, on Thursday, Coinbase also confirmed that the SEC has been investigating whether the crypto exchange has misstated its user numbers. That's what's happening here in the U.S. Back over to you in Mumbai.
Now, as trade policy concerns slowly start to ease, let us also listen into some experts on their outlook for the U.S. markets and their economy.
Within the markets, there was a substantial lowering of the policy storm over the weekend. With the agreement between the U.S. and China, we feel like we have a better understanding of what the equilibrium could be here. With tariffs, we're at about 14%. We think that could be a good ballpark. It's something that's not overly disruptive, although it is, 7 times higher than it was at the start of the year. So now we're pivoting. I think the market narrative is pivoting to the next 100 days, where we're seeing elements that are more friendly to economic growth and to the equity market, including tax cuts, which is going to be the big topic going forward, as well as movements on the deregulatory front.
Meanwhile, focusing on the U.S. economy, Fed Chair Jerome Powell has said that they feel the need to reconsider key elements around both jobs and inflation in their current approach to monetary policy, given the inflation experience of the last few years. Meanwhile, Citi chief economist Andrew Hollenhurst believes that the Fed should start cutting rates instead of waiting too long. Listen in to both their comments.
In our discussions so far, participants have indicated that they thought it would be appropriate to reconsider the language around shortfalls. And at our meeting last week, we had a similar take on average inflation targeting. We will ensure that our new consensus statement is robust to a wide range of economic environments and developments. In addition to revising the consensus statement, we will also consider potential enhancements to our formal policy communications, particularly regarding the role of forecasts and uncertainty.
I totally understand wanting to wait until all of this passes through the economy and we can see exactly what tariffs have done to the economy. But by the time you wait, this is what we learned during COVID. If you just wait and wait and wait, you will be too late. That's what happens. That's what happened in COVID when the Fed waited to see, is inflation going to be persistent? By the time they hiked, we already had persistent inflation. What worries me now is by the time they cut, do we already have a labor market that's weakening?
That's all the global market action, but how will all of that impact our own markets? Our research team is joining in with the trade setup, the stocks that are likely to be in focus, and of course the setup on the F&O side of things as well. Firstly, Vamakshi, tell us what are the important market cues that you are watching out for after that absolutely stellar session that we had yesterday?
Absolutely, Hormaz. A very strong session is what we had yesterday. The bulls made a roaring comeback in the last few hours of trade. The Nifty, in fact, recovered almost 550 points from the day's lowest point and crossed the 25,000 mark for the first time since October 17, 2024. The broader markets, they continued to do well. The advance decline ratio was largely in favor of the advances, with the advance decline ratio at 2:1. But it is actually the mid cap and the small cap, both of these indices, they sort of underperformed the benchmark index. Nifty mid cap was up 0.7%, while the small cap index was up 0.5%. As far as sectoral indices are concerned, most of them were in the green. Nifty Auto, Realty gained almost 2% each. They were the top sectoral gainers. In the week so far, Nifty Metal has, developed a very good sheen. It has gained over 9% so far. Defense stocks, they continue to charge ahead. Defense stocks have gained for the 5th straight session. In fact, in yesterday's trading session, we saw big moves coming on Astra Microwave, Cochin Shipyard, as well as Zentech. As far as the trading session today is concerned, we'll be keeping an eye out on the earnings of Hyundai Motor, BHEL, Delivery, as well as Imami. The Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal will be traveling to Washington on May 16, that is today, to lead high-level talks with US officials on a proposed bilateral trade agreement. So that will be another important factor to watch out for. On the upside, for the Nifty, the resistance lies at 25,250. On the downside, the support comes in at 24,800. Let's also look at what the GIFT Nifty is indicating. As of now, it's indicating a strong start to the trading session today.
Interesting there, Vamakshi. Thanks a lot for that. And over to Vinny now, who would list out the stocks that you need to watch out for in today's session. Vinny, good morning.
Good morning. So firstly, starting with IndusInd Bank, the Internal Audit Department, obviously the company had informed that they were conducting a review of its MFI business to examine certain concerns. Now, on 8th of May, there was a report that came out that said and noted that 674 crores was incorrectly recorded as interest over 3 quarters of FY25. And this is what the bank has also said. So keep an eye out on IndusInd IndusInd Bank. RVNL, they bagged an order of around 116 crore rupees from Central Railway, so we could see a bit of an up move on that front. JSW Energy, on the back of its numbers, is going to be in focus. Weakness in terms of operational performance coming in from the company. Net profits see a growth of around 16%, revenues up by 15.7%, but margins, that's seen a contraction, 37.8% versus 42.4%. So operational weakness, maybe we could see a bit of a red on the stock. We have Medanta, that's in focus as well. That's Global Health. Q4 numbers, steady quarter coming in for the company, growth of 15%, margins at 24.1% versus 22%, so keep an eye out on that one. Newland Lab, weak performance coming in for the company in Q4. We are seeing the profits are down by around 59%, revenue down by 15% as well, and margins also seeing a sharp contraction, 15.5% versus just 27.8% last year, so sharp contraction on that front. LT Foods, good set of numbers coming in from the company, at least on the top line and the bottom line front, a growth of around 7 to 8% that we're seeing there, but margins, slight bit of a pressure there, so keep an eye out on that. Crompton, 22% growth in terms of the profits, 5% growth in terms of revenues, margins seeing around a 200 basis point expansion. We could see a bit of an up move on that front. Bikaji Foods, on the other hand, a weak set of numbers coming in from the company, pressure in terms of the margins, revenues, as well as the profits of the company. And Allied Blenders, good set of numbers, revenue growth of around 20%, margin seeing an improvement, 14.8% versus 7.8%, so 700 basis point expansion in terms of margins. Could see a bit of a green here.
Keep an eye out on all of these names. There are plenty of earnings reactions that we need to watch out for today. Vinny, thanks a lot for that. And lastly, Sudarshan joins in with cues from the F&O space. Sudarshan, good morning. It was a wonderful session yesterday, but what's the F&O data indicating to you today?
What a session it was. So just one day ahead of the weekly expiry, we were talking about that data was turning negative and it might be a limited upside for market from here on. But just in 2 days, data has turned opposite direction. Now all the data that you will see are indicating that market might have further upside from here. And talk about yesterday's session, what a recovery we saw. And it was largely led by buying that we have seen in the large caps, and FI's buying also indicate in the same direction. So for today, despite the subdued global cues, we are seeing that GIFT Nifty is indicating a start with healthy gains. Now talking about the flows, FIs bought more than rupees 5,300 crore, while DIs have sold nearly 1,700 crore. Even in the index futures, we saw FIs buying almost rupees 4,000 crore, and they have added long positions of more than 13,200 contracts and reduced short positions of 8,000 contracts. And with this, their FIs long exposure now is around 46%. On the option front, one call that has seen healthy addition is 26,000 after the big recovery we saw yesterday. 26,000 call has seen addition of 43 lakh shares, and their premium is just 7 rupees, and 25,500 call has seen addition of almost 20 lakh shares. On the put side, now 25,000 put has seen addition of nearly 35 lakh shares, and their premium was 177. Levels for Nifty, support is 24,800 and resistance is around 25,200, and 3 stocks remain in the band.
Well, thank you so much for that, Sudarshan. But let's slip into a very short break. Up next, we take a look into IndusInd Bank as more accounting issues creep up for the bank. Welcome back. You're watching Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. In some trade updates, the US president has said that India has offered a trade deal to the US with basically no tariffs. Addressing the Gulf Cooperation Council leaders meeting in Qatar, President Trump said that the US trade with India is very limited due to high tariff rates. Foreign Minister Jaishankar has said that the trade negotiations are complex and not final yet. He added that any trade deal has to be mutually beneficial and work for both countries. He said, and I quote, "Nothing is decided until everything is."
You couldn't do business in India. We're not even a top 30 in India because the tariff is so high, to a point where they have actually told us, I assume you too, Scott, you were working on that also, that there will be no tariff, right? Would you say that's a difference? They're the highest, and now they're saying no tariff.
These are very complicated negotiations. They are very intricate. Nothing is decided till everything is. But any trade deal any trade deal has to be mutually beneficial. Any trade deal has to work for both the countries. And I think that would be our expectation from the trade deal. And until that is done, I think any judgment on it would be premature.
The Commerce Ministry has said that External Affairs Minister's response to the US President is appropriate. The ministry said that the talks are progressing well, with a team slated to travel to the US for further talks. Abhimanyu is joining in with more details on this. Abhimanyu, tell us more about the ministry's comments.
Well, the Indian negotiating team is slated to travel to the US in some time, and of course the round of talks, it hasn't been named yet whether it's going to be the first round of talks or negotiations, but both the countries are looking to ensure that the 90-day pause in applicability of tariffs can be utilized to reach the first tranche of a bilateral trade agreement between both the countries. Now, speaking of tariffs, speaking of de-escalation in trade, that is something which sources also indicated. The ministry has also pointed out that it's good to see de-escalation in the trade wars between the US and China with respect to both the countries reaching some degree of settlement with respect to a deal. However, the ministry pointed out that the tariffs still continue to be high between both the countries, and that, of course, more tariff reductions will lead to better decision making from companies with respect to competitiveness, with respect to decision making on manufacturing and setting up of manufacturing capabilities in various countries. Now, speaking about India, what sources have indicated that manufacturing competitiveness as well as profitability and competitiveness vis-a-vis their competitors are considerations which are used by several companies to determine where they are going to set up their manufacturing plants, which are independent of countries. So, of course, India is looking to increase its overall competitiveness. Sources also indicated that several decisions which are best left to companies would be based on these considerations instead of only tariffs. So the word coming in from the ministry is not just about tariffs, it's also about overall competitiveness despite the applicability of tariffs, which of course are expected to come down as the US reaches deals, reaches settlements with various countries, including China and possibly with India in the next few months. The 90-day pause still continues, but it remains to be seen till what extent concessions would be offered by the US, by India, since India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal is also stated to travel to the US shortly, and later for a 4-day visit. The negotiating team is also slated to travel to the US, and they are going to speak to their American counterparts and are going to thresh out several issues with respect to goods trade. Now, what sources had earlier indicated that issues like goods trade would be taken up in the first round of talks, and based on that itself, any further round of talks or any further settlement would be reached.
Well, thank you so much for that, Abhimanyu. But moving on, Turkish ground handling firm Celebi Airport Services has found itself in the crosshairs of the Boycott Turkey row. India has revoked the security clearance to the firm, citing national security. Celebi operates ground handling, cargo management and airside operations at 9 airports in India, including Mumbai, Delhi and Chennai.
Now, CIA President Sanjeev Puri, while speaking on the Boycott Turkey row, said that the time has come to eliminate economic activities with countries working against India. Listen.
We should certainly reduce or if possible, eliminate economic integration with such countries. Why should I mean, it goes without saying, why should you be creating economic activity for places that are working against national interest? So national interest must come first and foremost. And I'm very happy to see, a lot of Indian consumers in this true spirit of nation first are kind of cancelling their their tourism or the holidays, vacation they wanted to take in some of these countries. That's, I think, absolutely the right thing to do. Why should we be creating economic activity for countries that will work against our interests?
Moving on then, let's focus on IndusInd Bank. More accounting discrepancies come to the fore for the bank. We now have Ritu joining us to tell us more. Ritu?
Good morning, Vamakshi. More trouble now essentially for IndusInd Bank because it has identified, like you said, 2 more accounting issues in its internal audit. Now, their internal audit department, the bank said, has found 674 crores as incorrectly recorded as interest in 3 quarters of FY25. This is linked to the MFI book. And this amount, the bank says, was fully reversed as of the 10th of Jan. Keep in mind, the bank had first disclosed this, a few weeks back in April, saying an internal audit was being conducted into some discrepancies in the microfinance business. It had not quantified the amount at the time, but we had reported it would be upwards of 600 crores. And now we know that the internal audit finds the hit to be 674 crore rupees. Now, separately, another whistleblower complaint has alleged that there are concerns in other assets and other liabilities account of the bank. And that in turn led to the audit committee leading a separate investigation through the internal audit team into this matter, which has also found another 595 crores worth of unsubstantiated balance that the bank has in other assets account. These balances, Anderson said, have been set off against corresponding balances in other liabilities also as of January. Apart from this, the bank said that their internal audit team has also examined the roles and actions of key employees that were responsible in this context, and the board is taking some steps to strengthen internal controls, fix accountability of these people, and so on. Now, this is the first time that the bank has revealed that it had a whistleblower complaint and that an internal investigation was being conducted because of it. These are concerning developments. We've already seen the CEO and deputy CEO step down, taking moral responsibility for the issues, and this only spells fresh trouble for IndusInd Bank.
Fresh trouble indeed continues to be in the news as IndusInd Bank. Ritu, thanks a lot for that. And as a result of these developments, even CLSA has downgraded the stock, cut its price target. Morgan Stanley is also saying that the earnings estimates for FY26 and 27 are at a risk of a 15 to 20% downgrade. So keep an eye out on IndusInd Bank in today's session. Take a short break. Up next, cues from the commodities market. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and just before we go to Manisha Gupta for a commodity update, let's first also revisit how the Asian markets are doing, where it continues to remain a fairly cautious screen as we speak. The Hang Seng continues to trade lower as well, 0.6%. The Taiwanese index has just picked up slightly, 0.3% higher compared to the 0.2% higher that it was trading with at the start of the show. The Shanghai Composite now is 0.4% lower. Nikkei is down 0.5%, and the Hang Seng too continues to trade 0.6% lower. The Kospi, which was the only outlier earlier in the session, has also given up all its gains and is trading at the flat line currently. So a cautious screen. The Dow futures too currently are trading at around about a 30-point downtick as we speak. It was a good session on Wall Street yesterday, and that's showing up on the GIFT Nifty as well. A 100-point implied open gap up is what we are anticipating for our own markets today. So it'll be interesting to see how the day pans out. And Manisha Gupta now joins in with all the updates from the commodity space. Manisha, good morning.
Morning, and thank you for that. I'll start with gold prices because we seem to be cutting losses here. Overnight has been nearly a 2% of gains and a rebound above $3,200 an ounce. Well, remember, yesterday we went all the way down to $3,125 as well. But there's not so much of enthusiasm in the Asian markets right now. While there is support from setback in peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, the U.S. retail sales was weaker than expected, and the U.S. PPI fell as well. And that is where the markets are getting some pressure from. Crude oil prices on your screens are 0.5% down, but they are headed for a weekly gain of around 1%. There has been optimism over U.S. and China trade relations. Iran also may reach a nuclear deal with U.S., but U.S. inventories have showed a higher buildup, and IEA has raised a global supply forecast by 380,000 barrels per day. So it's very mixed, contradicting fundamentals right now. The markets will wait for more data, event statements to take cues from there.
Manisha, thanks a lot for that update. And as Donald Trump also mentioned yesterday, they are working very hard to sign a deal with Iran. But with that, we call time on this edition of Power Breakfast. From Vamakshimi and the team that put this show together, thank you so much for watching. Bazaar Morning Call sets you up for Friday's trade.